Hi everyone, I'm Akashu Makan Biradar. In the learning process of Java, in today's topic, we will learn about exception and exception handling. Today's date is 10th of Jan 2022. Now, what is exception? An exceptional condition is considered as a problem which stops program execution from continuity of the point of occurrence of it. It means it is the termination of program abnormally, not gracefully. This is called exception. For example, division by 0, array out of bond. It means array out of index of bonds. Now, if there is an exception, then what we can do? We should have to fix that problem or and try again or do something else instead to avoid that problem, and then you should have to exit the application by system.exit or retrieve the exception to some other method or portion of that code, or through a new exception of it, and replace it. There are etc terms we can do it. Then the remove the exception, the there is something code or there is something else that is called exception handling. It means, as the term say, it handles exception handling. It means, as the term it says, handles the exception. It is the mechanism to handle the runtime error. Now, what is the advantages of exception handling? It maintains the normal flow of program, and also it meaningful errors should be reporting. Now, there are two types of exception: checked exception and unchecked exception. Now, what is checked exception? Checked exceptions are those that can be ignored when you write the code. For example, file doesn't exist, class doesn't found. It means it checks the exception, and it checks the exception while compiling, or we cannot ignore that exception. We should have to fix that problem. After that, only after that we go further. This is called check exceptions. Now, unchecked exceptions. And unchecked exceptions is the type of exceptions. For that, you have to option either handle it or ignore it. If you elect to ignore it, then after some time, well, our program will be terminated. And if you select to handle that unchecked exception, then the result will depend on how we throw the exception, or by try catch, or directly we throw the exception. For example, array out of index bound. Checked exceptions versus unchecked exceptions. File not found exception, arithmetic exception. Checked exceptions occur at compile time. Checked exceptions occur at compile time, and unchecked exceptions occur at runtime. This is a big difference between checked exception and unchecked exception. There is no compile time exception. There is no compile time exception. Whether it is checked exceptions or unchecked exception, it only occurs at runtime. But which says directly the exception occurs at compile time, but we should have to know that there is no compile time exception. Whether it is checked or unchecked, it only occurs at runtime exception. Now, exception interface is throughable, and also error also interface is throughable. Now, we go through the detail table. There is throwable class which interfaces exception and error. In error, there are again two types: VM error and linkage error. And in VM error, there is again one type: out of memory error. And in exception, there are two type: runtime exception and IO exception. And also there is servlet exception and etc. The exam again there in IO exception, file not found exception, and in runtime exception, arithmetic exception, null pointer exception. Now, here the checked exceptions are only IO exceptions, and others are not checked exceptions. Others all are unchecked exceptions, but only IO exceptions are checked exceptions. Now there are some we take the some exceptions and their meaning. Arithmetic exceptions. For example, if you divide any number by 0, then some kind of arithmetic problem will be there. This is called arithmetic exception occurs. For example, if I take int result is equal to 10 divided by 0, then there should be arithmetic exception. Array out of index bound exception. If I declare array of array int a array is equal to new int 5, and if I store the number at a of 8, then there will be array out of bounds indexion, because their length of that array is 5, but I am adding it at the index of 8. There will be index out of bound exception. File does not found exceptions. It means the reference of your file cannot be found. Null pointer exception means the reference of an object has not been initialized. It's called instanced. This is called null pointer exceptions. Now number format exceptions. If you call any uh, uh, illegal number format should be there, such as called as number format exception. Illegal argument exception is calling method with improper argument is illegal format exception. Now there are some keywords to handle the exception. The first one is try, catch, throw, throws, and finally. Now we will go through the one by one. If there is an exception, then if you have to handle the exception, then the first method is try and catch method. The risky code should be write in try method, and in catch there will be solution of that code. And when there will be solution of that code, the object of that exception is created in try, and in catch, in parameter, we give the reference to that object, and by through we can handle it. And then again is another one is throw. By throw we declare direct exception. Through new is arithmetic exception. Through new array index about out of bound exception, that will be direct. And after throws means in the method we there is an exception, there is a checked exception already there, but we the method which exception is consisted, that don't take responsibility of that exception, that gives responsibility to that another method who calls the method. It calls throw. And then finally means if there is an exception in an code, and there is a mandatory code in our program, if you want to execute that mandatory code, then finally keyword is used. But the risky code should be there in try block. So this is the all information about exception handling. Thank you.